Yeah, a game launch is especially bad when the lead actor feels the need to speak out and say, yeah, that's unacceptable. So, Mindseye, for those who don't know, one of the most disastrous game launches of 2025. We actually have a decent amount of critic reviews coming in, and with 12 critic reviews, it's sitting at a 38%. The user score is not faring any better with 2.6 from 430 user ratings. On Steam right now, you'll find a mostly negative review score of 37%. The reviews are all skating about the fact that it's just not a good game. It is incredibly buggy. The open world is useless. The gameplay is very generic. The story has a cool synopsis and cool concept behind it, but it doesn't really execute on it well enough. And it's just a game that launched to really mediocre to very poor reception. Then you look at Steam charts and you'll find a player base that is non-existent practically at this point, with an all-time peak of 3,300 players, which is already a pretty abysmal start, and that quickly sunk into double digits. Suffice to say that this game likely did not make its money back. It is a AAA game with a AAA budget, but you can see right here there are entire threads detailing all of the issues surrounding the game, from all of the strange and hilarious but bizarre bugs that are ultimately incredibly disruptive to the gameplay experience, to all of the technical issues. I mean, here's one thread that is just post after post of all of the issues that players have encountered throughout the course of playing this relatively short campaign experience. The game shipped in such a rough state that streamers like this individual right here, Carnage, was forced to pause his sponsor stream right as it was starting, because they were like, we can't have sponsored streams due to the fact that what they showcase will be pretty, laughable. And speaking of laughable, you've got streamers like Dark Viper AU here who, finished doing the sponsor stream but could not contain his laughter because this shit was just so broken and ridiculous. You can see he's just cracking up. He's trying to be so you can get this game on these platforms, and he can't finish the stream without laughing because what he played was just that bad. And things are especially bad when even PlayStation is allowing refunds for a game. They're very strict about the refund policy when you buy a digital product. Sales are final, but when a product is in a rough enough state, last time this happened was Cyberpunk 2077 during launch. When a product is in a rough enough state, PlayStation will make special exceptions. So that's a very special release right there in all of the wrong ways. So you've got critics who find the state of the game at launch unacceptable. Players also feel the same. You've got PlayStation who's like, yeah, it's pretty bad. We'll refund you the game if you ask for it. And then we have the actual lead actor himself, who's come out in this interview right here from Check It TV, talking about his experience working with the game and also what he thinks about the launch state of the title and the reception that it has gotten. The actor, for those who don't know, is Alex Fernandez, and if his face looks familiar, it's because you may have played the game Mafia 3, where he played the lead character. I feel he's just drawn the short stick multiple times because he's clearly putting his heart and soul into his performance, but the games then end up launching in either a state or in a direction that is not ideal. Mafia 3 was not particularly well received, and now with Mindseye, that game was received even worse because of the myriad disastrous elements behind it. And when asked about those elements, he was very gracious. He wasn't dissing the developers. He actually said the developers were just really nice people that were trying their best. But he did criticize the way management let this game ship in a buggy, glitchy, unfinished state. And he was very candid in saying that he himself is a gamer and he finds that practice unacceptable and doesn't understand why businesses continue to do this when every single time they've done it, it's proven to be the wrong move that leads to financial ruin. So here's what Alex Hernandez had to say on this front.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of bugs, as a gamer myself, I completely understand the frustration. There's no, to me as a consumer and as a gamer, there's a shared frustration in why would you as a company release something that seemed to not be ready in that way?
So that's kind of a basic take that he said right there. And throughout the course of the video, he brings this up again and again. And so right here we have an article from GameSpot that transcribes some of that. He said, "It's not a lack of QA. I met the QA testers and they seemed competent at their job, but for whatever reason, the company decided to release something that has these issues and then taking care of it post-release. Obviously, we were not the first game to do that." And of course, there are myriad stories about unfinished launches. But yeah, he's actually 100% correct. A lot of people are like, wow, QA testers sure didn't do their jobs. Actually, QA testers did their jobs and sent all of their feedback to the developers, but either developers didn't have time to fully implement the fixes based on that QA feedback, or that feedback went ignored. Or rather, I should say that management rushed the product out to launch in a way that didn't allow developers to have the time to implement the fixes from the QA testers' feedback, or it was management who said, that feedback doesn't matter, let's ignore that and keep pushing forward with the project. QA testers often are the ones that people blame, but that is, I think, misdirected. QA testers are just the messengers. It is up to management to decide whether it's worth taking the time to take their feedback seriously and ensure that the product launches in a polished state. And that was just not the case with Mindseye. And I feel the frustration of Alex Hernandez, because when you book a gig for a video game as an actor, you don't know how that game is going to launch. You don't know if it's going to be super successful. You don't know if it's going to be a flop. You don't know what the quality is, because as an actor, your job is just to act. The rest is, out of your control. And so for him to get excited about this project, which has a cool premise, but then to ship in the state that it does, it does reflect poorly on the actor as well, even though the actor had no part in play in all of the elements that made Mindseye a disaster. He didn't write the story. He didn't, develop the code. He didn't implement the graphics. He wasn't the one who made the decision to rush the game out to launch. But this project now that has all this negative PR surrounding it, that has such negative optics, is now part of his resume. And, he's still very gracious, saying that, he still had fun working on the project and that he recognizes the efforts that developers put into this under the circumstances that they were given. But I understand that, he also would have loved this game to be shipped in a state where it could have garnered some level of success that could allow his role to shine a little more instead of it being a source of ridicule. Yeah, he continues by saying that I don't love that model of shipping games, unfinished, underbaked. I'm not a business person. I have no idea why that decision gets made. I'll just say that from a consumer perspective, and I'm sure a lot of people feel this way, I think it does more long-term harm than good to your reputation to release something that feels like it is in a state of less than 100% and then charge 100% of the price. Here we have another article by 80.lv that transcribed other quotes from that interview where he talked about how an early access model is something that other developers have utilized that have paved the road to really good results, saying things like, you have to be honest with your consumer. In fact, I, as a player, would rather be told this is in beta. I know you've been waiting for this for a long time, but this is a beta release, so whether you get to play it for free on some sort of invite list or for $20, $30, $15 in surprise, I don't know what the model would be, but it's a much smaller fee, so please come interact with our thing, give us feedback, but no, it's not done. Obviously, beta is a thing, an already pre-established practice, so I'm not sure what drives companies to essentially carry out beta testing without calling it that. I, as a consumer, would rather have someone be upfront, because then I know what I'm signing up for. The fact that despite the position that he's in as someone who's heavily involved in Mindseye, but is speaking out about the anti-consumer practices that it engaged in by releasing this product that's barely functional to consumers who are paying full-fledged price points for, what was marketed as a AAA game, I think to me that's very admirable. He's not just completely slamming the developers or anything, but he's being very earnest about the fact that, that just sucks to do to your consumers, to your community that you're trying to build, so on and so forth, to paying customers. And he's very correct about that model. It worked with the likes of Baldur's Gate 3, which was a very ambitious game. And so they did this early access kind of testing and, charged people a smaller fee for those who engaged with this while promising that they'd get access to the full game, because they knew that the game was in a rough enough state. There were enough complexities where they needed this testing phase to get feedback from players. And through that, they crafted essentially one of the best games ever made. And it's a process that does work. If you're upfront with people about what it is that you have output, then they will kind of go along the ride as long as you're just honest. And with Mindseye, there were layers of dishonesty, with one of the co-CEOs claiming that the game was being trashed because folks were being paid to trash the game and not because the quality of the game was, in fact, just far from ideal. Or the fact that Mindseye did not ship review copies out to media outlets, instead resorting to send early copies to sponsored content creators who themselves could not hold back the laughter of playing the game, because they knew that what they were playing and what they were recommending was just not something they would actually recommend. It was just a really bad quality product. Any new development studio undertaking a game like Mindseye, like it's an admirable endeavor, but when your practices start to become shady, when what you say to, kind of try to spruce up the optics of your game is shady, and when you market your game in a way that ultimately leads to customers spending money on a product that doesn't deserve that kind of price point, then that's where you kind of invite this level of negative feedback and just a whole lot of bad will. People just kind of are less empathetic towards you if you approach things that way. And that is reflected in the current estimated sales of the game, which are utterly disastrous. So we have right here The Game Business, a website that kind of analyzes elements of the games industry and game releases. And according to analysis company Ampere, they estimate that Mindseye sold roughly just shy of 250,000 units, or it reached 250,000 players, the majority of which were PlayStation 5 players, around 150,000. Just 35,000 of those players were on Steam. I imagine the rest might have been like on Xbox or something. And what's especially disconcerting about the low Steam player numbers is the fact that Mindseye has this feature where users can create their own content, but that's only available on PC. So the fact that we're seeing such low player numbers means that unique aspect that, the goal is for it to be a long-term kind of experience through a user-generated content, that aspect is going to die off as well with how low player numbers are and how quickly the player base of this game has plummeted. And so yeah, roughly 250,000 copies at $60. That's about $15 million that this game made. And I guarantee you that the budget of this title, being a AAA game, was much higher than $15 million. AAA games tend to have like a range of somewhere between $50 million at the lowest and, $300 million kind of on average, if not higher at times, depending on how ambitious a game is. I don't know what the budget for Mindseye is, but if it's within that range, yeah, this was a huge financial loss for this development studio, Build a Rocket Boy. And you can see how much of a financial loss this was for this development studio in the way that we've seen layoffs start, and we're already seeing this studio getting gutted, and this being their first game release, it's just a really poor start. One source told IGN that the layoff process sort of began on June 23rd, 2025, with the estimate being that around 100 of the 300 developers or employees within Build a Rocket Boy are going to be laid off. And later, when IGN reached out to Build a Rocket Boy for confirmation, they did say that this process is in fact ongoing, proving that the report that the source relayed to IGN was correct. So this is the statement that Build a Rocket Boy provided. We can confirm that we had to make the painful decision to notify our hardworking team of some internal changes at Build a Rocket Boy. While we are working to reassign roles for as many of those impacted by these changes as possible, sadly, we are initiating a formal consultation process that may result in redundancies, meaning layoffs. This decision has not been made lightly, and we're committed to handling this process with transparency, fairness, and respect for all employees. We'll provide further details to the team over the coming weeks, yada, yada, yada. So far, there's no indication that, the studio as a whole is going to get shut down, but it sure does feel like this launch has, at the very least, severely crippled this studio. And it looks like if they have a chance to make a next game, they'll have to pull all stops while also managing their ambitions and, not promoting this as like sci-fi GTA, because the individual who essentially established this new studio was a GTA producer, and a lot of the marketing made it look GTA-esque. And so that level of ambition for a studio that just kickstarted, they needed to make a much smaller scale project before tackling something like Mindseye. So hopefully with their next project, they'll have their ambitions in check. They'll make something just a little smaller, a little more AA maybe, that just has some really great ideas. You look at something like Expedition 33, that game is AA, essentially. AA game with AAA ambitions, with just a really strong vision and a scale that made sense for them. And so they need to manage what their capabilities are and be realistic with the kinds of projects that they can tackle, so they can kind of slowly nurture themselves and build up to a point where they can realize the full potential of something like Mindseye, a sci-fi GTA game. But they just, they chewed on far more than they could swallow, and the consequences were severe. They made a game that was just ultimately extremely lacking on all fronts. And clearly, Build a Rocket Boy now is climbing a steep hill for them to make any sort of comeback with, if they have a chance to make a future game. But I suppose only time will tell. For now, though, All we know is that Mindseye is as big a flop as a AAA can get, and it is a prime example of how not to make and how not to launch a AAA game project, especially as, an up-and-coming indie studio. Or at the very least, that's one man's take. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on this whole Mindseye situation. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.